Okay, good morning. I'm going to just talk for a couple quick minutes, and then I let you chat with our guest. But before we get to our guest, I want to let you know that 1513, which is the bill that we're now working on, right, did move out of the Senate State Government Committee. So good job. Your phones and your phone calls and emails helped. They did amend it though. So it is now only the Temperance Day provisions that has the social studies teachers and the auditors work on educating kids on the right to vote. It took out the provision that allows 16-year-olds to pre-register. Now remember that under current law, as a 17-year-old, you can register as long as you're going to be 18 at the time of the next election. So so it only took out the 16-year-olds. And putting the Temperance Day piece in there is what folks argue will help educate 17-year-olds that they do, in fact, have the right to vote. So really quick, I want David to pull up the bill history just to give you the kind of hold on, where we are, just so you can see this. So the bill, you can see now. So the bill on March 29th, executive action was taken in the Senate Committee on State Government. It passed with a couple of no votes. Can you click on the minority report real quick? So, or one no vote. Senator Pearson voted no, but everybody else in the committee voted yes. And now it is in the Ways and Means Committee. So, okay, we can go out of that page now. Ways and Means Committee, remember before we talked about this is the Fiscal Committee, and that's because, and Greg will talk about this, that's because there is a cost to the bill. And so I want to make sure, and I'll send you an email, we're going to need to be sending some emails and calls to members of the Ways and Means Committee. And the best thing for you guys is your senator sits on the Ways and Means Committee. So remember we met with Senator Carlisle when you were here, he's on the Ways and Means Committee. And so definitely calling his office and emailing him and asking them to bring it up will be very important. The bill needs to move out of the Ways and Means Committee by Tuesday of next week. So only a couple more days. So you really got to get on that over the weekend and on Monday to make sure that that happens. So that's sort of where we are. I want to introduce Greg Lane. And before Greg Lane was at the Secretary of State's office, actually, he is credited with being the head of TVW when we started the Capital Classroom program. So Greg and I met several years ago with a couple other lobbyist friends, and we had this idea, and he really deserves a lot of credit for getting this program going with TVW. He's now moved over to be Deputy Secretary of State. And so I want to introduce Greg to you. And I think I'll tell you, Greg, their main question is why did the Secretary of State's office oppose the notion of 16-year-olds having the right to vote? So turn it over to you.
Hey, good morning. How are you guys?
Good.
As Vicki said, I actually want to give her credit because this whole idea of Capital Classroom was hers, and it's just been a fantastic vehicle to help teach you all, kids like you, how the process works, and most importantly, how to be involved in the process, not just from afar, but to be actively involved. So I hope that this has been a great experience for you, and that you've learned enough that when you graduate and move on, that voting isn't the only way that you participate from now on, but that you now understand the legislative process enough that you can actively participate in that and make your voice heard as bills are being considered and laws are being made. So congratulations on your work on this bill. And I know that your support of the bill is one of the reasons that it ended up moving out of committee. So nice job on that. The reason that we had concerns in the Secretary of State about this bill was really not a lot about the policy. It was more about the logistics of implementation. And the problem is that the system that we currently use for voter registration is about 15 years old, and it doesn't allow us to within that system to manage the registration or the sign up of folks that aren't going to be eligible to vote before the next election. So we would have all of the different counties who manage the process of registering voters would have on their own had to create some sort of separate system to manage these signups, and we were concerned about just problems occurring, and that the mistakes might be made, that folks who are not eligible, who are signed up but not yet eligible to be registered to vote, might somehow get mixed into the voter registration database and end up getting ballots. And right now we have a proposal in front of the legislature ourselves to fund the creation of a new system that we've been working on for about 3 years with the county auditors. If that system, when it's up and running, will be able to accommodate policies like these. And so moving ahead, if we're able to build that system, we'll be much more comfortable with a policy change like this if the legislature decides to do that. But our concern about implementing it right now was that problems might take place before to put that system into place. So that was our main concern with the bill. But we're really excited about where it's headed, because we have always been very supportive and encouraged the legislature to implement a program where we can actively go into the classroom, and classrooms of seniors primarily, to register them to vote and get them ready to participate in the process as soon as possible. So I think we're really pleased kind of with where this bill has headed, and we're going to be supportive moving on to get it done before the end of the session.
So just a question from me before I open it up. How much what's your budget request to the legislature for that new system? And do you mean like a whole new software type system?
It is, yeah. It's, we'll be contracting with a vendor to build it. It's a whole complete replacement, not just of the voter database system that we use, but the process of the system we use to conduct elections as well.
Okay.
And so this would put all 39 counties, and the way elections work in this state, folks, is the Secretary of State doesn't run elections. Each individual county, led by the county auditor in most cases, sometimes an elections director, in the case of like King County, each of those counties actually run the elections themselves. So when we have an election, there's really 39 individual elections that take place in each county. The Secretary of State oversees that, and we report results, collective results. But in terms of operating the elections, they have all been individually run. The one exception to that is that the Secretary of State manages the entire voter database. And that's a change in state law that occurred in 2005. But previous to that, the database also was operated and managed by each of those county auditors. And the reason they made the change was so that we could more carefully control and prevent types of fraud from taking place, people being registered in 2 counties at one time, that type of thing. So by having a statewide database where the counties are reporting those changes to us, we can better catch those things and prevent that from taking place.
And what's your budget request is for?
So our budget request is for $5.8 million. We have about 3.6 million, so the total project is almost $10 million. But we're asking for $5.8 million in the operating budget. It was in the governor's budget. It was also in the Senate budget. It was not in the House budget. So we're working through to get that system in place, and hopefully that funding will be in there at the end.
So one thing that these guys could do potentially is talk to the appropriations folks in the House about making sure that gets funded in the final budget. So we'll put that on our list of things to do.
Yep.
Okay, great. So let's see if we've got any questions about, you guys can ask questions of Greg about Secretary of State, voting, et cetera. You can also ask questions about where we are in the process or any of those things. I see a hand in the way back.
Is the Ways and Means Committee the same thing as the Fiscal Committee? Is that the same or is it different?
Correct. So in the Senate, in the House, the fiscal committees are the Appropriations Committee and the Finance Committee. And remember, I think we talked about this a while back. Finance deals with taxes and appropriations deals with spending. So there are 2 different committees in the House. In the Senate, it's one committee, the Ways and Means Committee, the ways that you spend your money, and the means meaning how you get your money. So it's essentially appropriations and finance in one committee, which is the Ways and Means Committee. Yep. So that committee will be dealing with whether or not the costs of the bill is the right thing for the state to do. So when you contact members of the Ways Committee and specifically Senator Carlisle, part of what your message needs to be is the cost of this is appropriate and it's worth it, right? It's the value to the state to spend this money to provide this kind of education for students in Washington State. So you might want to expand your talking points that we worked on and think about now, not just is it a good idea, but is it a good idea to spend money on this? Does that make sense? Other questions? Yeah.
So, all right. So, crud. Okay. Your main concern with the 1513 was the system, right? Are there other concerns? And if so, what are the other concerns?
No, we don't have other concerns. So it's just being able to manage a policy change like this within our current system is problematic. And the way that our office and the way that Secretary Wyman approaches all elections policy is we want to improve and create as much access as we can, but at the same time, we've got to weigh that against the risk towards security and fraud. Mm-hmm. And so we look at all these different policy changes and try and figure out where it falls on that scale, right? Is it a benefit to access? In this case, this bill, yes, but we felt like the risk associated with it right now with our current system was just too much to be able to support the policy change right now. But if we can get the new system in place that can manage a database where we can keep these separate and make sure that there's no mixing of the two databases in place, then that'll alleviate our concern there. We'll be more comfortable with the policy change.
So potentially if you get your new system funded in this budget next year, there could be a bill that said this policy goes into effect at the time which that new system is up and running.
Correct. And actually we talked to Representative Berquist a little bit about that. Here though, the Senate was just uncomfortable enough with the policy change that the bill as written just wasn't going to go through. So I think in working with Representative Berquist to scale it back to just this small step. Oftentimes in the legislature, and Vicki may have already talked to you about this, when you want to make a policy change, sometimes you got to take little steps, and get there in increments. Mm-hmm. And this is a great step in the right direction. Hopefully by the change, it'll make more in the legislature that might be opposed to this a little more comfortable with the idea if we can show a track record of success and how this is really benefiting the state. And then we can come back and talk to them more about taking a next step toward, ultimately the goal that you want to get to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, sorry. Okay, after the bill, let's say it got passed or whatever, so how long will it take for it to be put into actual use?
That's a good question. So I'll answer quickly on just the technical, and then we'll have Greg talk a little bit about how the Secretary of State will approach that. The bill has an effective, it doesn't have an emergency clause on it. Some bills that are considered urgent have emergency clauses on it, which means they go into effect immediately upon when the governor signs that. This is not considered an emergency. So for normal course, if the bill is passed, the governor signs it, it will go into effect July 1st. And then the Secretary of State will have time to implement it. And I can't remember if there's timelines in there. So Greg, you can speak to that.
I believe the implementation date is July 1st of 2018.
Okay, got it. So it gives you a year.
It would give us a chance to coordinate. Now, remember, we're going to coordinate this program with the Superintendent of Public Instruction's office. So it gives us about a year to put a program together in coordination with them. And then I think the idea would be that the fall then, the full year in 2018 is when we would start the rollout into classrooms.
So next fall would be when it would start. And the Superintendent of Public Instruction, remember, that's the sort of the head of all public schools, kindergarten through 12th grade in the state of Washington, sort of like the principal of the whole schools, superintendent of all of the schools. Yep. There was another question right behind you.
Can you explain the civics education? The definition of what it would be?
Good question. Go ahead.
Well, I think I don't know that we know exactly what it would be. That would the curriculum would be what we develop over this, but primarily it would be come in and teaching folks from our point of view would be teaching folks about voting and the process, how it takes place, and focusing primarily on that more than on teaching more government type participation civics, but really educate students on how voting works and how they can participate, and then primarily or most importantly, I mean, getting them registered. We'll bring forms, we'll bring registration forms into the classroom. We'll have the computers available so that you can register online, and we'll actually, part of the curriculum will be getting you registered to vote so that you're ready to go and you'll receive a ballot that next general election.
Broadly, the term civics education means you're participating in civics education right now.
Right.
That's what Capital Classroom is. Civics education as a broad term is about teaching people how to be involved in their government, whether that's local government, state government, federal government, your water boards or your port of ports or any sort of function of government. It's getting people to understand how they can engage in those processes. For this, like Greg said, this will be specific to voting. But the hope would be that by educating students on voting, that also creates some curiosity for other parts of government, and it might help engage students in other parts of government. Just like this program is intended to help you understand this, your entire government. Hopefully you'll get involved in legislature or whatever as you continue on your.
And from our point of view, the civics education piece of this really was much more important to begin with, because even if you can't sign up to vote at age 16, the bill didn't get to that piece. That doesn't mean that you can't learn about it. And even if you could sign up, you still couldn't vote until you're 18. So getting into the classroom and having kids focus on learning about participating in the process, we thought was the most important part of the bill. We can always figure out other ways to get you registered before you turn 18 and are actually eligible to vote. But getting this information in front of you, getting you interested in it, engaged by it, and understanding it more completely is, from our point of view, much more important, because you get excited about it, if you get engaged, you're going to register. But if you don't hear about it, if you don't talk about it, if time isn't spent in schools about it, then you're unlikely to register. And so, keep that in mind too. The sign up, I understand you might be disappointed about that piece of it, but the bigger picture is getting this conversation started in schools, and getting kids to understand it and engage with it.
Yep. So, okay, we have time for a very quick last question. And I think I saw, yeah, right in the front.
So you talked specifically about having seniors or going into senior classes, but would this be an all grades sort of project for the civics education, or just seniors?
Right now, it's focused primarily on the senior classes, because Vicki mentioned that the current law reads that you can sign up at 17. Actually, that's not true, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
It's not in statute that you can.
But you allow people to.
The current practice from all the counties is that they sign folks up who will be eligible to vote by the next election is kind of the deadline they use. So, so kind of following that, yes, we would focus primarily on senior classes.
But potentially, if it's successful, it could expand.
Yes, absolutely.
As you get going on. So, okay, we only have like a minute left. So I'll send you an email with the folks that I need you to contact. But really, most important, it's like every single person should contact Senator Carlisle, because he's your senator, and you met him. I know many of you did. You need to let him know that you really want him to work on moving this bill forward. And then we will see if we can get it out of Ways and Means into the Rules Committee and ultimately through the Senate. I think that's all we have for today, but good job. And I want to thank Greg for taking the time to come and talk to you all, and hope you guys have a great weekend.
All right, thanks.
All right.
You too. Thanks, Greg. Okay, bye.